Assalamualaikum dan salam sejahtera. Anda sedang menonton rakaman khas Agenda Awani. Dan hari ini saya ingin berbicara dalam bahasa Inggeris kerana saya perlu mengalu-alukan kedatangan dua expert ataupun pakar yang penting dalam pembangunan global. Paling hampir dengan saya adalah saudara Haul Yang Zhu, Penolong Setiausaha Agung Pertubuhan Bangsa-Bangsa Bersatu PBB. Beliau juga pengarah dan pengurusi Biro Rantau Asia Pasifik. Saya juga ada saudari Michelle, Residen Penyelaras Pertubuhan Bangsa Bersatu ataupun PBB di Malaysia, Wakil Residen Program Pembangunan PBB UNDP. I would like now to move on to English. I've just welcomed the both of you in the local language. But I guess when I have a great person like you from UNDP and who looks at the Asia Pacific area and geographical area, when we talk about Millennium Development Goals, this side of the world, we always look, when I say we, is the average layman, as the bottom 40% of the world. And they are mostly in Asia, in our countries. There's a lot of debate about MDGs, Millennium Development Goals, whether it has really achieved what it set out to do. But I guess if we look at statistics, and this is my own humble view, there are improvements in the key areas where we are debating about the 8 objectives of MDGs. However, whether we achieve or we agree that it's achieved or not, 2015 is less than 550 days away. So what's next? Because in order for things to be sustainable, it cannot just stop at one point. Life goes on. We are not even thinking what our future generation would be saying about us and what we decide this year, next year for post 2015. So I would like to get your views first, maybe as a recap, on what was the best thing about the Millennium Development Goals and its efforts that you want to highlight. And maybe from there, we could move on to go and see a world post-MDG.
Sure. Thank you. Thank you for having us. The Millennium Development Goals, I think the best thing about it is that it has provided a framing for the global development agenda, because the issues we're addressing are so diverse, right? With poverty, maternal mortality, drinking water quality, partnerships and so forth, many issues. Okay, and the MDG framework, based on the Millennium Declaration, provides the organizing framework for all countries, all developing countries in the world, and also as a basis for partnerships for development. So I think that has been the key benefit. And it also provides a focus. Okay? It allows everybody to have very simple framework. It's complex issues, but a simple framework with the targets and indicators. I think that has been the benefit. Now, on Malaysia, I think Malaysia has achieved a very high level of economic development and social development over the last 30 years. The GDP per capita is high, very high. And the Human Development Index is also very high among developing countries in Asia Pacific. I think according to the UN assessment, together with the government, we believe that Malaysia will achieve most of the MDGs by 2015. Okay. There are a number of areas where there's a last mile to go. Okay. For example, in terms of maternal mortality, okay, the progress has been very impressive, but Malaysia set the bar very high. Okay. It set a goal of 11 per 100,000 live births. Now you stand at 26, right, which is low, but still not achieving your goal yet, just as an example. Yes. Right? And I can give other examples.
I think also certainly there's been a lot of progress around the world. The MDGs has been one of the most concerted push around essentials in Malaysia, in addition to the area that has been highlighted by the Assistant Secretary General. Certainly Malaysia will achieve most of the MDGs ahead of the 2015 deadline. But in addition to that area of lag on maternal mortality, we also see some remaining gaps around inequality, and particularly
geographical.
Particularly if you look at the disaggregated level, because Malaysia at an aggregate level has an impressive record on poverty reduction. But when you look at a subnational level, when you look in particular pockets or at a spatial level, rural-urban divides, there is still some remaining work to be done.
There's so many things that I want to ask. There's 8 objectives I can pick from, but I guess if I can sum it all together, urbanization. that's fronting us all. And more than 50% of the global population is already in these areas. In Malaysia, we're looking at maybe 70, some people are saying, or more than 70%. So if we don't solve and make it happen for all these 8 objectives and more post 2015, we're not making it. So one of the main things is maybe relooking at the model of holistically. If they don't migrate and congregate into one place, then maybe it can be a more sustainable way of addressing problems. Because when you wait for people to get together at one place, then of course natural resources will not be enough because it's geographically it's not sustainable. And now we're talking about building tunnels under the range across the peninsula just to divert water from the next largest state. So in this particular point, and you have traveled the world, where we look for political will is there needs to be a new thinking in the whole economic model plus the social development model. I'm going at a bit of a macro level on this because why would people have to move to cities to get a better quality of life? Why can't somebody who loves the rural environment, who have skills that benefit him or her in that environment, stay where they are and yet still enjoy some, if not most, of the benefit that the urban dwellers will have to benefit from? Is that too much of idealistic thinking, or isn't that the way to go for the future?
Yeah, I think urbanization takes place very often for economical reasons. That's a reality, right? And Malaysia has a very high level of urbanization, over 70%, right? And it's continuing. Right? Estimates are that it will be 75%, in a few years. Now, I think you have a point. The point, I think, is that we need a balanced approach to development, right? And we cannot only concentrate on urban development. We need to also pay attention to rural development. I think Malaysia is now preparing the 11th five-year plan. Yes. I think its objective is to focus on sustainable and inclusive development, right? Sustainable in terms of resources for future generations, but inclusive also for all Malaysians, right? Both in rural and in urban areas. So I think the awareness is there, the thinking is there. And we have been working with the Malaysian government and the civil society organizations, on models for rural development. And we have shown that local level engagement, community participation can complement the centralized economic development approach. If you combine them together, I think it can produce very positive results. We have shown that.
I have to go for the first break. Once we are back, I'll bring Michelle into that also. It's easy to talk about it here, but when I look at China, and they're talking about super mega cities with 50 million or 60 million people, and that's not that far away, just 6.5 hours flight away. So, since you have traveled the world, and you always look at things global, and we like that because sometimes borders don't matter theoretically when you look at issues like this. So, what's the best practices across the world that we can look for? I know they're forming the 5-year plan, but so much more being talked about the role of civil society and communities. Maybe instead of just waiting for policymakers, the grassroots can suggest things and put out their own initiative. What's the best model to pick up from across the globe? We'll talk about that after this short break. Thank you so much for watching this special recording of Agenda Awani. It's a very, very important topic, the MDGs, so Millennium Development Goal. Please Google if you don't know the 8 objectives by heart, but we'll put the graphic on also. I'm still here as Assistant Secretary General of the UN, and I would like to tap Hao Liang Zhu's views on the best practices that you have seen, or policies, or implementation on ground, or just community on ground which have expressed their intentions for MDGs and beyond, because I think sustainability is already at the grassroots. It's just that leaders now have got to keep up with that expectations.
Sure. I think this may tie very well to the question you raised earlier on what happens after 2015, right? The UN has been working to have consultations with a range of partners, from governments to private sector to civil society organizations to ordinary citizens around the world. And we have run a campaign over the last year until now, where I think 2.3 million people around the world have joined. Okay, and 3,000 of them actually are Malaysians. Okay, now this consultation showed very clearly what people want. Okay, people want very clearly a participation in decision making. Right? They want their voice to be heard in government decisions. They want the continuation of the MDG agenda. The unfinished agenda must continue, right? And they pay a lot of attention now to responsive government, right? Accountability. They want the question of inequality to be addressed, okay, right? And they want a lot more other things, like traditional health, education, and so forth, right? So a few very salient points have come out through millions of voices, okay, right? It's the same, for the Malaysian, votes, okay? So the question now is that how can we combine a very strong Malaysian, planning system, right? Civil service system, right? To also take into account people's considerations, right? That's precisely what the UN system and economic planning unit are doing these 2 days in Kuala Lumpur. Right? We're running a national campaign on how we can implement the future goals, which now is taking shape. Actually, the UN has just released a preliminary report on the 17 areas for sustainable development goals. So we're doing this consultation today and tomorrow in Kuala Lumpur, and we'll run more consultations across the country with different groups.
Michelle, you've been around the country. You're close to the CSOs and the NGOs and the people in pockets of community. What's your view on that? Because sometimes people are very vocal about things, but the engagement is not at that level. We talk about it, but we don't do anything about it. But maybe you've gone a bit more deeper into that, and maybe you can give your views on our participation and all the things that we're discussing.
Yeah, I think certainly the United Nations system or engagement here in country is quite broad with a range of development stakeholders, which does include academia, civil society, and other actors in development. It is a very engaged public, and as the Assistant Secretary General has said, 3,000 Malaysians contributed in the last round of discussions. Now, the areas that he mentioned around, wanting better service delivery, wanting honest, responsive, and accountable government are things that will be discussed over the next couple of days. And I think, to connect to your earlier question, the issue is they also want to see this at different levels of government. For a country also with rapidly growing cities and other urban areas, we also have to find ways where we can ensure this service delivery and governance that is effective also at local level.
I would like to put that into reality of today, because yesterday and the day before, you could notice that people would be wearing face masks on the streets. But sometimes that has nothing to do with what the government of this country can do, because maybe the smoke are not coming from our territory. It's coming from another country, for example. So I think multinational issues like that, this is where the MDGs really will be good at, because it transcends nation states. And if nation states don't work together, because this state can just say, what can I do? I need this. My people need to burn stuff, But now the wind just blows somewhere and we go to other countries. So the body that can put everything together for quality of life. Because complaining about that in Kuala Lumpur might not do much good, because it's not originating from within the city centre itself. So speaking to urban well-being minister, for example, can only bring you so far. But looking at it holistically with international regional mechanism, I think is the way to go, and to do it fast in another matter, because we do know in the last millennium it will go the traditional way. This diplomat will sit with this diplomat, then be higher up. But nowadays we can't wait for that. Citizens want change now. I don't want the haste tomorrow, not just yesterday.
Yeah. I think regional cooperation is critical in addressing some of the issues. I think you mentioned the question of smoke here, and I was visiting Iran recently. There were thunderstorms in Tehran that were generated in other parts of the Middle East, right? We also have serious, thunderstorms, in China, which are generated other parts of China, but it can go as far as Japan. So there are a lot of regional issues, okay, which require regional solution. I think the UN, for the UNDP included, are working very hard, on these issues, and we work in partnership with donors, with governments, on protection of forest resources. Okay, we try to provide alternative livelihoods, right? And the issue is that you need to look at why people adopt slash and burn means, right? Yeah, because this is cheaper, this is easier, right? So in order for them not to do it, you have to provide alternative means for them to have sustainable livelihoods. That's why we emphasize that for development to really take place, you need both pay attention to sustainability, but also needs to have inclusive livelihoods and the quality of life, right? So I think the issue you raised is right, and we are actually really focusing on these kind of issues.
Okay. I don't have the time. I wish I do have the time to go one by one of the 8, but I have to go for the last break. But once we are back, I want to sum up everything. We've touched on the grassroots, but there's another key area that I want to touch upon, the role of corporations and the private sector, which key and very, very crucial. Remember talking and discussing about carbon trading, and that's supposed to cap things because it'll give some form of economic value. Even though sustainability cannot just be measured tangible documents or countings or measurement like the GDP, but that's still a very powerful tool to measure progress. So if we don't hit or make it matter in the financial statements, profit and loss, how do we include the private sector in? Because profit, first and foremost, is their focus. So let's discuss that on a global scale after this short break. Thank you for still staying with us, discussing the future for all of us and the next generation. At the rate that we're consuming stuff, generally on average across the world, we're going to need 5 planet Earths pretty soon in the near future. But there's hope, and I prefer to be pragmatic on stuff. And when I look at MDGs, a lot of good numbers are being, and UN even have a special setup just to look at measurement and data. I don't want to go into it in this discussion, but I want to bring in the other side, a huge component that we need to look at in the 21st century, which are the corporations. Multinationals, I think they have budget bigger than the whole Malaysian government, for example, some of them. So what they decide in their supply chain, for example, really goes into the heart of the sustainability agenda. So how do you include them in, and what have been the progress globally on this matter?
I think we all agree private sector is a source of growth, right? Jobs, government revenue, and so forth. And the UN has been promoting corporate social responsibility for many years. The Secretary General has also issued a call to action for private sector to join the development process. I think the challenge now is that, yes, we've seen a lot of corporate social responsibility. We've seen a lot of corporate philanthropy, for example. What we need is that they go beyond charity, right? And be active participants of a responsible, sustainable development. For example, there are a lot of examples of so-called impact investment, right, where private sector choose to invest in projects that have strong environment and social benefits. We're talking about social enterprise, for example, where not only the project generates environment social benefits, but also generates financial profit, because private sector needs to make profit, right? To have incentive, right? So we need to look at the government policy, but also innovative approach to do that. UN, for example, we're developing a program, UNDP, right, where we will invest, our resources to build capacity, right, in entrepreneurship development, skills development, to come up with bankable projects. Then we tell private sector, these are the projects do you want to invest, right? Now you choose to invest, right, if you see the potential for profit, but you also take a risk, right, because not all projects will succeed, right? So we're looking at these innovative models to really bring private sector in.
I've looked at, and thank God for international conferences in Kuala Lumpur, I've looked at an idea in Nigeria where heavily polluted rivers, fishermen cannot fish in the river anymore. So this Ivy League University turned old canoes and stack them up into sustainable production of plants and grains, for example. So, but we are seeing more innovation and the rate of innovation at social enterprise level rather than multinationals and corporations, for example. So how do you propose that, like I said, if we don't include the big companies in, then huge steps are not made?
Yeah, I think, again, every country has legislation, regulations to regulate environmental impact, right, of private and public activities. So the question may be enforcement, right? But another source of inspiration is actually traditional practices, right? Okay. In Malaysia, I saw in Sabah, the Tagau system of local indigenous practice, which have been proven effective in turning around the environment degradation and the resource depletion. So we needed to look at all sources of potential and use existing knowledge, to really to its maximum.
Make the local community demand products and services. They are, fit for their environment, sustainability. Have you seen that happening in Malaysia?
We are seeing a shift in the way the private sector in Malaysia is engaging. Certainly CSR activities and the more charity type events have been the main feature. But certainly we've seen a breakthrough recently, largely through work with UNICEF and the Companies Commission of Malaysia, where what we would like to see more is this role of a partner in development, a much more long-term engagement. So for example, to work alongside multilateral institutions like us and government to also change the policy environment to have more child-friendly businesses. We've been working close with the private sector on the Secretary General's Sustainable Energy for All initiative, and also more recently bringing the private sector much more in on issues of risk and management of risk. Supply chains today are quite global. We saw, recent floods in Thailand didn't only impact Thailand, as you said. So private sector involvement in shaping regulations around things like risk management, around things like child-friendly business. There's a whole range on which we need large, small, and medium companies to get involved.
I have to stop it here because that's all the time we have. I wanted to ask about equity and UN, in the makeup of UN itself, making it more 21st century, representing more of Asia. I guess you have to visit us again. Of course, Michelle will always be here. We take it for granted. So, thank you so much, Al-Zul, and thank you so much, Michelle. Thanks to you for watching. Hantarkan pandangan anda sendiri tentang objektif MDG dan sebagainya pada pelbagai platform yang Astro Awani ada, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram dan sebagainya. Dan insyaAllah, kita akan bersama lagi dalam episod Agenda Awani yang lain. Sekian, selamat malam dan terima kasih. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Terima kasih.